Welcome to Earth Archives. Wine is always indispensable in modern high-end social occasions or restaurants, but you know that the behavior of pretending to be high-end wine is not new in recent times. In fact, it has been around longer than we think. Let's talk about one today. A relatively recent case of counterfeit grape wine. Before the show starts, please subscribe, like, and turn on the little bell. If possible, leave your thoughts. This will help the growth of the show. Without further ado, let's officially start. The wine of grapes not only adds flavor to civilized life, but also symbolizes social status and the ability to deal with others. However, lurking in paradise is a winding serpent. Because the prices of wines vary, wine fraud is always present. The Code of Hammurabi from the 18th century BCE established several regulations regarding wine merchants, one of which stipulated that those who misrepresented the price of alcohol could be sentenced to drowning. In the 1st century BCE, figures like Pliny the Elder complained about the prevalence of counterfeit wine in ancient Roman taverns, especially of his favorite wine, amber Falernian wine produced in the hills of Campania. Modern wine frauds are even more numerous, among which a wine fraud incident is particularly famous. Thomas Jefferson, a connoisseur of wine, during his tenure as the American ambassador to France from 1785 to 1789, discovered that wine merchants were untrustworthy, and thus strongly advocated purchasing directly from the vineyards. Therefore, Jefferson's involvement in one of the most infamous modern wine scandals may not be surprising. Several bottles of wine, reportedly centuries old, were rumored to have associations with Jefferson. These wines were owned by Hardy Rodenstock, a German wine collector fond of showing off, and began to appear at auctions and exclusive wine tastings in the 1980s. What made these wines outstanding was not just their age. The artificially blown bottles bore imprinted years such as 1784 and 1787, but what was particularly remarkable was the initials, Th.J., engraved on the bottles. It was claimed that these wines were discovered in a house being demolished in Paris. In a cellar surrounded by walls, isolated from the world, and the initials strongly implied that the wines were originally intended for Jefferson. But he had not managed to acquire them before returning to the newly established United States. The first bottle was sold at a London auction in 1985, from the year 1787 and from Jefferson's beloved Chateau Lafite, fetching a staggering $156,000, 4 times the record price for a single bottle of wine at the time, purchased by the publishing magnate Malcolm Forbes. Unfortunately, when Forbes publicly displayed the wine, the cork in the bottle neck shrank due to heat from the lights and fell into the bottle. Wine, especially aged wine, rapidly oxidizes when exposed to air, so no one today knows the condition of the fragile amber liquid inside the bottle. While white wines darken with age, this wine from Chateau Lafite is a red wine, so its color would lighten with age. In the following years, other bottles from the same batch received mixed reviews at wine tastings, yet Rodenstock still sold several bottles privately, their prices undisclosed but assumed to be exorbitant. One of them, also from Chateau Lafite in 1787, was later sent for testing in a laboratory. And while the sediment matched the characteristics of a 200-year-old wine, the liquid did not. The one to clean up the mess was the wealthy American collector Bill Koch, who bought 4 bottles supposedly belonging to Jefferson from various sources with the intention of exhibiting them publicly. Koch's representative, Brad Goldstein, contacted experts at Jefferson's Virginia residence, Monticello, to search through Jefferson's records in hopes of finding any mention of the wine. However, despite Jefferson's meticulous documentation of everything, the experts could not find any records of ordering such wines, not even one from 1787. In fact, this discrepancy was discovered before the first bottle of wine was sold in 1985. Suspecting foul play, Koch hired private investigators to assist in the investigation, who subjected the wines to high-tech testing. The wines bottled today all contained a radioactive isotope called cesium-137, which exists in the atmosphere solely due to nuclear tests and disasters like the Chernobyl accident in 1986. The first atomic test occurred in 1945, meaning that before 1945, cesium-137 inches did not exist, so it is impossible to detect it in wines from the 18th century. The wines purchased by Koch were tested with a gamma-ray spectrometer, yielding an indeterminate result as the cesium levels were not significant. Meaning that while the liquid inside was indeed very old, it might not necessarily be 200 years old. Disappointed with the results, Koch persevered, continuing to have experts investigate and test many bottles. From Rodenstock's collection, including those left behind by Forbes and other wines from Chateau Lafite and Chateau d'Yquem. After microscopic examination, they concluded that the Th.J. engravings on the bottles were made with modern dental drills, not with 18th-century hand tools. Further investigations obtained written testimony from 3 German technicians admitting to engraving the bottles. Despite their age, these bottles and their contents had no connection to Jefferson. Most wine tasters have limited financial resources, and they may not sympathize with the wealthy gamblers who spend big money chasing expensive wines, considering wine as a perishable commodity that needs to be consumed. Koch recently acknowledged this fact, reportedly auctioning off half of his wine cellar. Unfortunately, most buyers likely purchase them for display and bragging rights rather than for genuine enjoyment. However, what is most frightening is that ordinary wine drinkers are as susceptible to fraud as the big spenders because fraud is rampant in the mass market. In 2012, one of the largest wine producers and distributors in Burgundy, Labouré-Roy, was accused of fraud, involving up to 1.5 million bottles of wine sold worldwide. The fraud ranged from mislabeling, the simplest and most common form of wine fraud, to blending inferior wines into expensive premium wines. Eventually, all owners of Labouré-Roy were arrested, and the company was bought by another wine producer. In 2008, the Brunello-Poli wine scandal erupted, with rumors that expensive Brunello di Montalcino had been adulterated with cheap table wine brought in from elsewhere. In 2016, it was reported that in Selvazzano Dentro, Italy, someone had passed off cheap Prosecco sparkling wine as a product of a famous champagne estate. Wine fraud cases are numerous, and due to a lack of regulation in the market, such frauds are likely to continue in the future. As long as there are price differences in wines, and consumers cannot discern the authenticity of wine, the temptation of fraud will always exist. If you think that the only way to avoid being cheated is to only drink the cheapest wine, then you might be right.